All right. Noting the hour and the presence of a quorum, I call the Acton-Boxborough Regional School Committee to order. Welcome, everyone. Thank you to Acton TV for taping this meeting and providing it on their website, actontv.org. I just want to note that the deadline to submit papers for Acton has passed for the election on March 31st. 3 candidates are running for the 3 seats: Amy Krishnamurthy, Yabin Wang, and Kira Wilson-Cook. It's uncontested, so we will assume that they will be joining us in the spring after the election. The Boxborough deadline to submit papers is March 31st for an election on May 19th. Before we get started, I just want to note that when we have our discussions this evening, I'm going to run it a little bit different because different people ask their questions different ways, and in order to avoid the appearance of bias towards different members, I want to make sure that we give everyone a fair shot at their question. So when we are discussing things, I will give everyone one question at first, and if I deem that there's enough time for us to have follow-ups, then we will make another round. All right? This is the part of the meeting per policy BEDH when members of the public may speak for up to 3 minutes on items not included on this agenda. Comments regarding items on the agenda should be made during that part of the meeting. Typically, the committee will not respond to comments during public participation. Is there anyone that would like to come up? Christine or Mike? All right. Great. And we don't have our high school representative, so Peter, it is your turn.
All right, well, good evening, everyone. Happy 2 days before break. And happy pre-Valentine's Day. I'm going to just start with a few congratulations. We have some exciting news that I'm able to share tonight with you. But coming up in May, I'm actually going to be attending an awards ceremony with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education that's held at Mechanics Hall in Worcester. And we're actually recognizing 2 of our schools and 1 individual educator in the district that night. 2 of our elementary schools have been selected as schools of recognition by the Department of Education based on their spring 2019 MCAS results. Recognition is awarded to schools based on overall performance in any of 3 categories: high achievement, high growth, or exceeding targets. The Luther Conant Elementary School was recognized for high growth and joins an elite group of only 67 schools statewide K through 12 to have earned that recognition. And the Paul Gates Elementary School is being recognized as one of only 6 schools statewide to earn the distinction as a school of recognition in all 3 areas of achievement, all 3 areas of high achievement, high growth, and exceeding targets. So that is absolutely fantastic news. We want to congratulate all of the students and the staff at those schools for the hard work that they do. I also want to recognize one of our high school chemistry teachers, Mike Romano. He has been named a state finalist for the Presidential Award for Excellence in Mathematics and Science Teaching, or affectionately known as the PAEMST Award. You may also recall that Mr. Romano previously was awarded the Albert Einstein Distinguished Educator Fellowship at NASA in 2017. We hope to learn more about the national winner for the PAEMST in the coming months, but wish Mr. Romano the best in his process. So congratulations again to all of our students and staff. These are some great recognitions, and we're really pleased about that. I want to also just circle back. We had the high school incident on February 6th where I wrote to our community about a swastika that had been found in the snow on the outdoor basketball court at the high school. I just want to let all of our community know that the high school completed its investigation and was able to determine the student who had caused the incident. We can't discuss the specifics of disciplinary measures taken, but we can tell you that the measures were consistent with our high school code of conduct. Additionally, the school is working through a restorative justice process and ensuring that appropriate education is part of the follow-up. We are also investigating additional school and community educational opportunities and hope to have more information available in early March regarding that. I want to reiterate to our community that we absolutely will not tolerate such acts of hate within our schools and want to continue to work to make sure that all members of our community feel safe and supported. We also were fortunate. A week ago, we held another superintendent and school committee chair coffee, but I just want to put out in the announcement that our next coffee is Tuesday, March 10th from 7 o'clock to 8:30 p.m., so that's another night coffee, and that is right here in this room. And then finally, happy vacation. I think, it's been a long stretch between budget processes and everything else that goes on through January and February, and I just want to wish you all a happy Valentine's Day and a happy vacation.
All right, item 3 on the agenda is a negotiations update. So, John and Marie.
I think we'll have Marie do the slides, and I will go through the slides, and then obviously at the end we can have discussion of points that need additional clarification. So if we have slide 1 up there, let me begin. In Sunday's Boston Globe, readers responded to the question, "What works in Massachusetts?" I was struck by 2 responses. "We value education, not just in spending, but we actually value learnedness and respect teachers." And another person said, "Paying teachers well and expecting them to be professionals has sent Massachusetts to the top." Tonight, the school committee is conducting our open discussion of the contract between the Acton-Boxborough Education Association and the ABEA Regional School District. I believe at the end of that discussion, we will vote unanimously to approve the contract because it does reflect the value that Acton-Boxborough community places on education, it compensates teachers fairly, and embodies our expectations of our educational professionals. On the next slide. Back. Yeah, there we go. In terms of process, every contract negotiation starts with comparisons both inside and outside the organization. The school committee made these comparisons and established a negotiating subcommittee. One of the most important drivers for this negotiation was salary equity with respect to our peer communities and salary equity as a function of years of service to the district. Next slide. Before we discuss the specific elements of the contract, I note the limitations of contracts. No contract can address every situation that will arise in a working environment. Contract negotiations serve to build relationships and understanding beyond the simple words on the page. I thank the members of the ABEA Negotiating Committee, Mark Lewis, Mike Balalescu, Amy Maciel, Gabby Berberian, Kristen Kilcummins, Jill Newman, Tracy Hodson, Martha Patel, June Montepoloso, Jen Pratt, Carolyn Imperato, Sheila Conway, Megan Gianetto, Anthony Zeese, Peter Montalbano, Mike Romano, Patty Sears, and Diane Spring. I also thank the representatives of the school committee, Amy Krishnamurthy, Tessa McKinley, Paul Murphy, and administrators Maria Altieri and Andrew Shen. Including Andrew in our negotiations was very helpful as he experiences what the contract facilitates and what it impedes on a daily basis. I believe this will lead to improved contract administration because Andrew will share the understandings developed during the negotiation process with his fellow principals and administrators. The agreement we discussed tonight is the product of the work the school committee began in September and continued through a series of negotiating meetings. Last week, the school committee reviewed the contract in executive session, and this week, the ABEA voted to ratify the contract. Next slide. Part of the excellence of our teaching community is derived from peer norms and the communal commitment of the ABEA to excellent teaching. To improve professional learning, we agreed to limit courses eligible for reimbursement and salary increases and to increase financial support for rigorous coursework. You can see the numbers on the slide. Next slide. The Memorandum of Agreement, MOA, also includes several changes related to maximizing the quality and quantity of time that teachers spend with students. The existing contract language had an undesirable use them or lose them incentive with respect to personal days. This language was removed, and unused personal days will now roll into sick days. When teachers retire at the end of the school year and provide timely notification of retirement, the school district can provide the best experience for students and optimize the process of hiring new teachers. The outdated early retirement incentive ends in this contract and is replaced with a sick leave buyback. Next slide. ABA compensation consists of salary and benefits. No benefits changes were discussed in this negotiation. The new contract increases both mid-career salaries and provides cost of living adjustments, or COLA, for ABEA members. Next slide. Although our salary schedule is similar to other teacher contracts in that salary increases with steps, years of service, and lanes, additional education, it is atypical in that it provides salary increases tied to experience throughout a teacher's career. We term these increases Supermax. At ABEA, we believe this more appropriately values teaching experience. However, in comparing ABEA compensation to other districts, we found that in mid-career, we were not offering a competitive salary. To address this issue, we increased Supermax for teachers in steps, that's years 13 to 17, from $1,000 to $2,000. The annual budget impact of this change is about $128,000. Next slide. Okay, this is the good stuff. Now we get to look at the graph. The graph shows teacher salary over time for various school districts. Many districts have adopted a structure of rapid salary increases over the first 10 to 12 years, followed by only COLA increases after that point. So you can see that most of these curves go up and then they just go straight across. If you look instead at the AB lines, you can see that focusing on the part of the graph from 13 to 17 years, you can see that under the old contract, that's the red line, our salary lagged most districts in these middle, years 13 to 17. Under the new contract, the black line, mid-career salaries are better matched to other school districts. And in terms, I think that's, oh, no, here it is. So the one thing that I did want to note in this, if you're wondering, how long a typical teacher works in the district, it's about 15 to 25 years. And I note for the record that Bill Noweth is not a typical teacher. Next slide. The ABEA salaries for FY21 will increase 2.2%, with 1.5% coming from the new agreement and 0.7% related to the split year in the current contract. For FY22 and FY23, COLA will be 2.5%. In all years, we expect experience and education, steps and lanes, to increase salaries an additional 2.5%. But every year, teachers retire and replaced with new teachers at lower salaries. On an annual basis, this reduces salary costs by about 1%. Finally, the elimination of the early retirement incentive will reduce salary costs over the course of the new agreement. Next slide. We also made some important language changes to the contract. I and my fellow school committee members were fortunate to be able to participate in seed training this past summer. The new contract ensures that we provide teachers with anti-bias training as well as Universal Design for Learning, UDL training, on an ongoing basis. One of the school committee agenda items that traditionally attracts attention is the annual school calendar. The ABEA agreed to increase our flexibility to create good schedules around Labor Day in the new contract. Next slide. Additional changes to working conditions include language around teacher transfers, classroom moves, and leaves. Stipends were added and aligned with no significant budget impact. And the last slide. The negotiating process served to renew our communal bond to education and provided understandings beyond the contract language itself. The agreement meets the objectives of incenting better education and providing competitive compensation. The school committee and the communities of Acton and Boxborough should support the agreement.
Thanks, John. That was very brief. Your slides look excellent. Good work. I just want to note that we had an incredibly collaborative process this year, and it was really, truly, everyone warned me about participating in negotiations and how much work that was going to be, and it really was a lot of work, but within an environment where everyone was respectful of each other, and it was really amazing to see educators and administration and school committee work so well together. So thank you, Mike. Did anyone want to discuss? Diane?
Can you speak to the COLA for FY21, specifically to the 0.7% carryover from FY20, please?
Because I think she'll do a better job, I'm going to have Marie explain how the salary was treated in the current year and how that will show up next year.
Yep, great. So the last contract, the 3-year contract, had the first year was 1.5% cost of living, and then the next 2 years, which included this year, had what's called a split COLA, which means the first day of the contract goes up a certain amount, and then halfway through the contract, it goes up another amount. The way that we implement that is we average it and we pay teachers the average the whole year, which for this year was 1.8%. But the effect that it has is then at the end of the year, the base salary goes up leading into the following year. So at the end of this year, the base salary will go up 0.7% before we start next year. So the average for this year and the cost for this year was 1.8%, but there's a 0.7% addition at the end of the year before we get into next year. So next year, we negotiated 1.5%, but the effect of the leftover from the split year is an additional 0.7 for a total of 2.2% cost of living. Having done that for 2 years, there was a strong will of the committee to not do that going forward and to have a straight cost of living that is more transparent and visible to the community.
Can I continue the cost of living? So the cost of living is like the inflation rate, right? Is somewhat. So is it tied to the actual inflation? Because every year, I'm trying to understand historically the inflation rate and versus the COLA, and trying to see, because some years the inflation rate is actually very high, some years are very, minimum. So how are this COLA correlated to that, and also what is the past history?
If you roll the clock back a long time, since I'm very old, I can remember when inflation was 10, 12, 14%. And in those cases, in those years, these contracts, and the structure is actually a very old structure, most of what was negotiated were those things related to inflation, and steps and lanes were a relatively minor effect. What's happened as inflation has dropped over this last decade is that inflation and steps and lanes are sort of similar size. But from a negotiating perspective, obviously there's always discussions around, external equity, what are people being paid outside the teaching profession? And then, as of course, was the case for us here, we were very much focused at, how are we competing for the teachers that we want in terms of our salary schedule?
I do recall in the previous round of negotiations, we did actually get into consumer price index, but it wasn't the instrument upon which we based the COLA. It was just something that we all knew was there. This round, I don't think we even mentioned it. So sometimes it's something we look at, and sometimes it's not. But it's not a formulaic kind of thing.
I love the graph, the compensation, salary comparison. Mid-career equity was a concern for the committee, and this does a nice job at kind of lifting that piece of it. Can you speak, though, to the tension between having a 2.5% COLA, also the cost of moving everyone in the steps and lanes, and the tax levy situation in Acton?
So the salaries, of course, are the biggest element of our budget. And so if salaries go up 4%, that immediately tends to send our budget towards 4%. And the question is, will that be sustainable over the long haul? And I think, the people might have different ideas, but the general, sense of how community revenues have been increasing is it's more like 3%. So that obviously does put budgetary pressure on the district, and that's something that we will have to address, as we look at this next budget year.
So if there aren't other questions, there is specific wording for a motion on your agenda. Jenny?
I move that we approve the proposed Acton-Boxborough Education Association contract for the period from July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2023, as set forth in the memorandum of agreement between the bargaining committees for the ABEA and the school committee.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great, that passes unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mike.
Tessa, could I make one
Yeah,
quick comment?
absolutely.
Everybody should realize, of course, that the amount of work that goes into a graph like this is tremendous. The graphing is the least of it, the collection of the primary data that you need to look at this, or many other questions that the negotiating committee and the school committee, need to do. All that work had to be done by someone, and I want to thank the person sitting at the table, Marie Altieri, who in fact is the source for all of the information which was critical to our discussions.
I just want to take an opportunity to thank Marie, Andrew, all of the school committee members who participated in the process, as well as all of the members of the association. Since I've been here over the last 2 years, the relationship between the administration and the association has just been remarkable. And it's, what's really struck me is the professionalism that all of our educators bring to the table each and every day. And, I know, that's evident through the negotiation process, but we see it in our schools every day. So, Mike, thank you, to you for all of our educators and all the work that you do.
I noticed after we started that our high school representative snuck in. Do you have any report? It's okay if you don't. If you want to just listen, that's fine, but I wanted to give you an opportunity if you had an update. Okay. That's cool. That's fine. I just wanted to make sure I acknowledged that you were here, so. All right. Dave.
Thank you. Thank you. You have in your materials the memorandum for the second quarter financial highlights. Typically, this is the first projection of the year where we look at the major categories of expenses. So the first page of the memo, I'm just going to walk through in a little different manner just to highlight some of the data from the second quarter. These are the major areas where we have revenues projected to the end of the year in excess of budget. So charter school aid, the formula for how the state determines charter aid has been in flux, and we've been conservatively budgeting that. So we picked up a little. Unfortunately, we gave it back on the expense side, but from the revenue standpoint, we're up a little bit higher than $50,000. Medicaid reimbursement, again, we're doing very well with our reimbursement methodology and the use of the consultant, and we expect a little bit more than budget for that item. Investment income, we have tracked 6 months worth of actual receipts, extrapolated that to year end, and on top of that, we've added our estimate for earnings from the bond proceeds, which should be issued roughly a month from now. We should have the bond proceeds funds in the bank. I can talk about that later if desired. We can leave it at that for now, but we had discussed this at the budget subcommittee meeting earlier in the week. And so for all revenues, we're projecting about $400,000 to the good. We should be about $100,000 better than that. I've not reflected it in the memo or on this chart because I don't know the exact amount yet, but in the fiscal 19 supplemental budget, you've heard me talk about that, the state increased the amount of reimbursement for transportation aid for FY19. It passed and was signed into law in January of 2020. We've been told that this will be booked as an FY20 revenue, and when we get exact information, we'll pass it on and build it into our future projections. But it should be in the neighborhood of $100,000. Significant expense items, these are the typical, the usual suspects, as they say. Salaries, right now is showing a fairly large deficit when we project our run rate to the end of the year. However, as Marie said during the Budget Subcommittee meeting, we do expect that to improve by year end as unpaid days come and are not paid, and the amount of encumbered funds for salaries is not realized, and as we go through the year, that typically happens, and we should have that managed to zero or a positive number by the end of the year. I should say that this page is troubling. You see the projection at this point is $631,000 negative at year end. So I'll start with salaries and say, given that what we know and experience in the past where things typically will work themselves out favorably from now till the end of the year, we could have come up with some number, say $300,000 we think will gain from now till the end of the year. But I need to be transparent with you and say this is the projection that we have right now. We will monitor it, and I'll report on this through the end of the year. And again, the prediction is that this number will turn around by year end. Fringes is the big driver in that category is health insurance. As is stated in the memo, the salary number is largely driven by a number of teachers and assistants that were hired during FY20 after the budget was passed to serve the needs of some additional students in special needs and English learners. The health insurance for those who are eligible, this cost is over and above what we have budgeted. That's the primary reason for that category being in the negative at this point. Facilities, nobody but Peter, I think, was here last night when JD made a really nice presentation to the building committee. I was fortunate enough to listen to it, where he talked about utilities long-term. What does that have to do with fiscal 20? Nothing, but it's indicative of the fact that utility costs are very well controlled by the facilities department, and in large measure, this projected surplus relates to utilities. And again, my guess from my experience when I was JD at another district, it should improve by year end. The winter has not been as severe as normal. Typically you save on heating costs when that happens. Excuse me, so we're looking for that to be better as well. Out of district tuition, that's not an estimate, that is the projected tuitions as of today for students we know about, and their encumbered, the cost of the encumbered costs for their services. I'll come back to that in the next slide briefly. And assessments, you heard me talk about charter revenue being up, while charter expense is up as well, so those two things have tended to wash out. There are some other categories not presented here: instructional costs, the costs supervised by the various buildings. Typically those run a surplus at the end of the year. Individually, it takes up too much space on the slide and are too small individually, but they should have turnbacks. And so we'll continue to bring you results and projections as the year goes on. But at this point, it is a significant difference from whoever was sitting in this spot, it was me, told you last year through the second quarter. And I should say that, I'm at the slide already. So out-of-district tuitions, here in big picture format is what's happened. And I'm reviewing the details with Debbie Dixon. She has been out ill recently, and so I don't have anything more than an overview because I need to look at a few more of the numbers on the projections that we have. But our initial budget was $7,655,000. That's before circuit breaker. new placements, and remember that that budget was set in December 2018. So we're now in February 2020, and the fact that we have a number of families moved in, a number of students who have either moved in with their families or their placement has changed, whether they've gone from one out-of-district placement to another, or whether they've gone from an in-district service to out-of-district, the impact on that was over $1 million for those students. And that's separate from the next line on this. I kept the ups and the downs separately just to show the impact of the dollars involved. Just as there were students who moved in, there were students who moved out, and students whose placement changed to the good financially to the tune of about $640,000. And all the other students, the special ed department encumbers tuitions when an agreement is entered into. Sometimes the cost of those services change. For all the students, the net change there was $14,000. And so the difference between the FY20 budget derived in December over a year ago to what we're projecting now is $400,000 higher. As I said, we're still looking at that. The special ed department recently made some changes to the good and disencumbered some funds. So we'll monitor this to the end of the year. If we need to, the circuit breaker balance, which was next to, if not zero, when full regionalization occurred, has been built up to $2.4 million, and I submit something like this, where we have an unplanned variance of special ed tuition costs, is exactly what the circuit breaker reserve should be used for. You can see that we budgeted $2.8 million. The preliminary estimate from DESE is just short of $2.8 million, so we're on track there, and if we need to dip into this reserve, that's what I would suggest, how I would suggest we end the year relative to this category. So I wanted to touch on the high points of the memo, which you've gotten. That's it. It is only the second quarter. We have a history of significant turnbacks, and hopefully this is not the year that that's broken. So I'll answer any questions you might have.
Will J-Lo and Shakira perform before Q3?
Not in the district. He did.
Dave, either last year or the year before, you were noticing that certain account variances were kind of had wide swings, and my understanding was that you were going to look at that a little bit and try to make whatever adjustments to be account by account to kind of level out those variances. Is that?
Well, I know that the finance department has gone to a number of departments and consolidated their what's called character codes within their department. So if you look at everything on a budget responsibility basis, which is how I review things, because the junior high principal is responsible for his accounts. So when I look at on a character code basis, and it's got all the principals mixed in there, it's not of much help to me. But we did a lot of revising of character codes to put accounts where they should be. For example, we had a number of lines in the special education department that were contractor driven, but they were rolled up into a salary line. So when I presented those things across years, the old years accounted for them one way, the new year accounted for them a different way. So in last year's budget memo, I think the one that went to Budget Saturday, I had a whole page devoted to those reclassifications, how to make things work. We've still got one more year of the old way, and so we should be much more comparable if you want to look at 3 years in a row, meaning last year, this year, next year. We should be in good shape next year with all of that reclassification.
For the, on the page of the revenue projections, slide 2. We talk at the budget sub, so can you clarify the investment income? What's that coming from?
Right. So I talked to you at the last meeting about which way should we go as far as issuing the bonds, if you remember that. We had the opportunity to take more than and issuing by the bonds $75 million, which is most of the financing needed to fund the Douglas Gates School project. We have the opportunity to get more than that and keep that money and repay $75 million, or take less than that and pay a shorter amount of debt. But either way, we're going to have a significant amount of money. We will get all of those funds given to the district at the outset. It's different from conventional means of funding a project, which is you get the invoices, you short-term borrow, you pay the invoices, we don't have any money, we don't owe any money, and continue throughout the life of the project, at which point you issue the bonds, which is what we're going to do next month. You issue the bonds then, and it repays all of the short-term debt that had been taken out. So again, in those situations, the owner, or the district, if you will, doesn't have funds on hand. We've inverted the process this year, and by taking $75 million up front, starting the clock on repayment of that debt at a favorable interest rate, we will have that amount of money available to us to invest. The money could sit in an account of Treasurer Dennehy's choosing. She's looking into investment options with the same advisory firm that works for us relative to the OPEB trust. And so that money will begin to earn interest, and as was asked last night, somebody said, well, I didn't think you could earn interest. You can't earn interest more than what you're going to pay in interest on the debt. So if we're assuming that the rate of interest on the debt is 2.5% out, we can't earn more than 2.5% on it. Asterisk, you can if you structure it right, and a lot of things that are not likely to happen. So we will have a significant amount of money on deposit, and even at 1 to 1.5%, that's going to generate a significant amount of income, which is general fund revenue. So we've estimated that for the remainder of this year, if the funds are on deposit for the last 3 months of this fiscal year, that we should get, and this is a conservative estimate, but $200,000 on those bond proceeds that would flow into the general fund, and hence it's in this projection.
At length, at budget, yeah.
In Angie's behalf,
Yes.
she asked me to give you the background for her real question. Am I right?
Because I'm kind of looking at this, whether that should go to general fund or the capital stabilization, because this is money that we are borrowing from for the new project. And in the future, that if at the end, if there's more money that's needed for the new project, if funded to the stabilization, capital stabilization, then we'll be able to use for the new building.
Go ahead, but is this something that is going to be a longer conversation that we would end up having at a future meeting to discuss this? Yes.
It is possible. And my quick answer was going to be that if it's treated this way, it will flow into E&D and be available for any use of the school committee going forward. If it flows into, and as a matter of fact, that it goes into this fund does not preclude you from transferring it to capital stabilization in the
Sure,
future.
but it's a discussion we would have at a future
I
meeting.
think so.
Okay, thank you. Did anyone else have a question before he moves on to the next part of, right? You doing the next thing too, right?
So
just gonna talk-
the memo is the memo.
It says state aid up
I went a little overboard on state aid and would answer questions if you have them, but I wasn't going to go
Okay,
into
that's-
intimate detail on that.
That's fine. Do you have a question? Sure, go ahead.
On going back to the investment income, does that then include investment income from the OPEB as well?
No, the OPEB by statute has to be maintained separately and can't be touched.
John?
Could you just summarize, now that you've had another chance to look at the Student Opportunity Act, what the conclusion of this document is for FY21, as well as what your current thinking is about FY22 and FY23?
Conclusion being,
What you currently would expect to happen, knowing that,
John.
of course, things could change.
Go ahead. Say your-
That's actually something I think Dave and I started talking about, and we want to do a little bit more analysis and then come back at another meeting.
and all I'll say is from the standpoint of FY21, it is what it is. We're getting $30 a student of minimum aid, and that's it.
That appears to be the end of the questions for that thing. So did you want to give a quick EDCO update?
Yeah, I just want to talk, we included the EDCO annual report in your packet, and normally we don't comment too much on it, we just provide you with the annual report. But I wanted to draw your attention to a couple areas of concern with the finances in EDCO. Overall, what you see if you get to the auditor's reports was for fiscal year 19, they ended the year with a gap of over $1 million from budget to actual, which is pretty significant. And it was an amount, as you read into the report, that had not been anticipated as they went through that budget process. This is an area of ongoing concern. The $1 million gap has been already made up through their reserves, so there's no more gap going into FY20. However, there were some formula errors in some of the spreadsheets they were using during their budget process, which also led to a significant gap for FY20 of about almost $500,000. EDCO has been working on mid-year staffing reductions and shrinking some of their programs to be able to bring their operating budget within the actuals that they now anticipate. That's an ongoing discussion that we have. I actually have a board meeting tomorrow morning that's being done as an emergency board meeting where we're going to hear from the new interim financial consultants that have been hired for the next period of time. I'll know more after that, but I wanted to bring this to your attention now so it didn't sit out there for very long. The other area, and so the gap, if you're looking for it in the EDCO report, was on page 12 of their financial statements, and that's where you get to the $1 million. The area also of significant note is page 27 of their audit report, and it's note P, and it's substantial doubt to continue as an ongoing, or as a going concern. So their general fund balance, the unassigned cumulative, is down to just over $300,000 now, which is significantly lower than it has been. And so the auditors did want to make sure that the EDCO board was aware of that and that we could work with the executive director to take appropriate actions to turn that around. Right now, we have not heard that there's any financial impact to the districts that participate in EDCO. It's more being bridged through mid-year reductions than anything else, but it's going to be a priority to make sure that entity is fiscally viable in the future. That's something that the board has been working on. It's an emerging problem. We were just notified of it probably a couple months ago when we saw the draft audit report. But then we needed to finalize the audit reports and make sure everything was accurate. So that's kind of the process that's been going on. As I said, we have ongoing board meetings. We're learning about this as we go. I do anticipate we'll have more information in the coming month or two to be able to provide you. But I just wanted to draw your attention to that so that you could take a look at that in more detail.
Thank you, Dave. Okay, am I correct that we don't have minutes, right? Okay, so the minutes from February 6th will be voted at our next meeting. Marie, did you want to update us on the special education director search?
Sorry, it's easier to look at you than to talk behind your backs. So we formed the search committee for the Director of Special Education. I'm pleased to say that we had 35 people volunteer to be on the search committee, which was phenomenal. The committee is 13, so we did a random draw out of a hat by category of the people who applied. We had our first meeting today. The group seems great. We have a timeline over the next 6 weeks or so whereby we're going to select candidates to interview them, and make recommendation for finalists. Once we have finalists, then Peter takes over, and he will interview the finalists, do site visits. We'll have them in district to meet with groups and that kind of thing, references, all of that. So we hope to have an appointment by mid to late March. We posted the position January, I think, 17th, and it's posted through the end of next week. So we've had sort of plenty of time for administrators to apply, and we'll keep you posted.
Thanks.
I have a question.
Yep.
I see in your memo here that we have 22 applicants so far. I guess my first question, and then the related question, since I can only get one question, is do we believe that
Part A, Part B.
do we believe that volume of applicants is below, on par, or above what we would expect for a position of this? And my second question is really more of a comment, which is I hope that we do see a good diversity of candidates who apply, since that's one of our strategic areas.
Sure. So we hope to get more applicants. So I originally had it closing on February 6th, and we extended it through next week, hoping to get more candidates, which is not to say anything about the candidates, because we haven't, screened them or gone through that process yet. So 22 is not a lot. Of the 22, they're not all going to be qualified or, necessarily have the right background or be the right fit. In a principal search, we tend to get between 30 and 40. This position is known to be hard to get a lot of applicants for. So across Massachusetts, Director of Special Education has been a tough position to fill. There are a lot of interims out there. But we have high hopes and hope that it's all going to work out.
Just to add to that, we've been going out and, meeting area, people in the region, and, making sure people know we're inviting people into the applicant pool and that it's wide open, and we're very excited to try and get as many applicants as we can.
Any possibility if the candidate, that you feel, are we gonna choose one out of the pool 100%, or is there any room that we're gonna extend more?
So, when we go into the process, we go out with the intention that we can come in with a very strong candidate as a finalist, and that's the goal of this process. I think, there's always a decision point in any search that if you hit a point in your search process where you feel like you have not found the right candidate, then you would, possibly extend that search or reopen it. you know, we're just not there yet. We're so early in the process that we're really hopeful that we have a good candidate pool ahead of us, and we're moving forward. But, you know, we always reserve the right to reopen something, and the last thing we're going to do is bring in someone who we really don't think is the right person for this job.
Thank you, Marie. Thank you. All right. Well, don't go far. I don't know who's doing the school building committee update. Your name's on that too, so.
Yeah. So while
See, I
Marie's
said
coming
don't go
back to
too
the
far.
microphone, Marie, we're going to trade seats here. So, you know,
No, thank you.
yeah. As you look, if you want to look at some slides from the building committee meeting last night, JD did a presentation where he presented a bit of an analysis of the savings that we're actually going to realize from the solar panels from the building. That was very eye-opening. You know, the cost savings in energy alone is about $4 million, if I'm recalling that number correctly, over the life of the 20-year span of the solar panels in the purchase agreement that we're doing. That's a huge savings. And if you remember, the total cost of going triple net zero was about $3.5 million. So this is a decision, at least from a solar perspective, that's paying itself off, which is really good news to see. In addition, you know, it's getting to kind of a fun stage of the building project. The building committee is doing a lot of work on the exterior design of the building. You can go online and see the updates. I don't know if we have last night's meeting posted quite yet, but that will certainly be up in the next day. Additionally, we spent a good amount of time last night talking about location of softball field, whether we wanted it on the east or west side of the parking lot. And that's progressing, and we're continuing to study that a little bit. But then we're also doing color theory for the inside of the building. And, you know, the architects came in with an absolutely beautiful, beautiful color palette for the inside of the building. Those, again, the slides will be up online if you want to take a look at what they're doing. But they really wanted to capture on the sense of nature. And so they really brought in this idea of a tree. And so as a tree grows, so some of the earth tones are in that bottom floor. And then as it goes up through, you start to see some of the greens come out like a tree, and then as you go up into the third floor with Douglas, it's more like the sky, and that also ties in with some of the school colors that were already in existence. So it's a really neat thing if you want to see. It's kind of the fun side of the building project, not just the numbers, although I will say the, you know, bond issuance is absolutely riveting. But it's also a nice break to get to look at some colors and see how things are coming in from a, you know, just a aesthetic perspective. So I'll turn it over to Marie, because we've also been engaged with our faculty in getting more feedback around the actual interior design of the building.
Yeah, so this week we've been having what's called programming meetings with faculty, and so that's been really fun. Monday, we had a 2-hour session on the Library Media Center. We had our library media and digital literacy teachers from across the district come and help with the vision of the Library Media Center, which is 2 stories in the building, and it's going to be the hub and the heart. In our educational program that we submitted to MSBA, we described the Library Media Center as the hub and the heart of the building. And so that's exciting. And then yesterday, we were here all day, and we had groups of teachers, early grades, upper grades, special education, reading, EL, many groups throughout the day. And Friday, we're going to have pre-K staff and faculty in here. The blue lines that you see are all about programming the building. They outlined a classroom so that teachers could see what a classroom would look like. They outlined a small group space. On the wall over there, you have a student cubby. And so you can see the kind of work that is being done. But so it's exciting. It's really coming to life. The color piece, you know, I was on the building committee for the last 3 buildings, and colors became the thing people wrestled over. And this thing that came through this week, unanimously, people were like, I love it, it's great. And that's, the Gates theme will be more in the greens, and the Douglas theme will be more in the blues, and the tie to nature, and it really, I think it's going to be great.
I don't remember where I read this, but did the building committee talk about a reduction in the exterior glaze? And I was wondering if that was going to impact our ability to achieve net zero?
Yeah, I can speak to that. So one of the things that came up during the value engineering process was we looked at reducing the exterior window glazing by about 5%. From an aesthetic standpoint, it's really not noticeable from the change, but that actually positively impacts our ability to achieve net zero. You know, window glazing is actually energy inefficient compared to brick and mortar on an exterior of a window. So we're in good shape. All right, so, well,
With respect to the building, is there any update on how we're communicating building progress to the community?
we continue to update the website with information as we go, so that does not stop as we progress. And then once Consigli is fully on board and we're actually beginning the construction phase, they'll actually help us develop a website that will keep everyone informed. They also have regular communication that goes out to abutters during the construction process to make sure people are in the loop with what's happening. And then similarly, you know, Principal Newman has been talking with Gates families and staff around plans for the modulars and what we're going to be doing in terms of having to move some classrooms in preparation for work this summer. So yeah, good ongoing communication. In fact, we actually had a special invitation for one of our abutters who happens to go up against where the parking lot or softball field is going to go. So we did a special invitation to any abutters that were right in that area and invited them to the building committee meeting as a way to give us feedback on that decision. Welcome back. So item 4.4.2 is a recommendation to authorize the district to enter into the project scope and budget agreement with MSBA. That is something that they want to vote to do. The agreement, I believe, is in your packet. I will say that there can absolutely not be any language changes in this, which is also an instruction we had to give to our attorney. The MSBA provides you with the language. Our attorney, you know, asked me a question, and our project manager said, actually, the answer is no. It's exactly the language MSBA provides. It's a standard form template. We just need to vote it, but that provides also a copy of the overall project budget for you. My goal would be to vote that tonight, and with your approval, I will sign it in the morning, and we will have that off to MSBA, and that is the one outstanding item that we need to do in order to actually receive the reimbursements from MSBA. So if we want money, we have to get that signed.
I just had a quick question. So I didn't know that when I was reading through it, but there was a paragraph about insurance, and it was like flood and earthquake insurance, and it's to the tune of the value of the project, or $10 million, whichever is the lesser, I guess. But regardless of the number, is there money in the budget that includes, you know, that insurance?
Yeah, so from an insurance standpoint, actually Consigli picks up most of the insurance costs while the project is underway. Dave also has reached out to Maya, our insurer, just to make sure that if there's any gaps, we're able to provide that, but we don't see that being a significant cost.
I move to authorize the district to enter into and be bound by the project scope and budget agreement.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any, why are you laughing at me? Any abstentions? No, that passes unanimously. Great. Okay, statement of warrants. Guys, it's only 8 o'clock. Budget, oh, sorry, budget. Just kidding. I'm jumping right ahead.
Well, so Dave pretty much went over everything we talked about. We got the Q2 report. We had a long conversation about the interest on the bond. So I won't repeat it here.
There are 2 warrants on the agenda now being circulated. Vendor warrant 20-017 PR in the total amount of $565,636.57, and payroll warrant P2017 in the total amount of $2,772,996.77. Peter, would you like to highlight any of the FYI items?
No, I think the one that I'll highlight, there's a memo in your packet around the lower fields and the next phase. As you're likely aware, the lower fields were graciously turned over to us through the generosity of some of our local organizations in town and the Friends of the Lower Field Committee. That was actually a couple years earlier than originally had been anticipated. We had put together a 5-member committee, which is per the agreement. In some discussion, follow-up discussions with some of the local youth sports, there were some concerns around representation and making sure that we had the right voices around the table. So we're actually going to go back to the original Lower Fields Committee and see if they're okay expanding that by a couple of seats in order to make sure that the youth sports all have a place at that table. So we may very well amend that memo that's in your packet. I just wanted to let you know that you may see a second version with hopefully a couple additional seats on that committee. I will also say it is flu season, and, I know, we certainly see that in our schools. We also know that, families in our community can become concerned about some of the illnesses that are going around right now. We do just encourage people to, have good hygiene, wash hands, things like that. Our nurses do send out information. We've done that a couple times already this season, but we just want to continue to encourage good habits.
I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Unless you, go ahead, Diane.
I appreciate the efficiency which you ran this meeting tonight. And the fact that we're about to adjourn is pretty amazing since it's 8:02. I did want to make one request, and that is, we appoint liaisons to a lot of different committees. And I think that it doesn't serve the committee well to not just at least check in. It makes people aware that what other committees are doing. It makes the new members aware that these committees even exist. And I think it just enriches our knowledge and it helps us connect what we do to what's going on. So I would just put out there that maybe a quick just kind of go around on the table would
Sure, and that was a little bit of an oversight because I know that there was an EDCO meeting that I think Angie and Nora went to. I think it gets missed a lot because most of the liaisons are like FinCom and we end up talking about it during ALG and BLF updates. But did you guys have anything that you wanted to say about the EDCO meeting?
Yes, Angie and I attended the EDCO school committee member roundtable, and it was a really good experience. It was a really small group. I think there were 6 of us total that were there. We spoke some about upcoming changes in funding that we've all been talking about together. What else did we talk about, Angie? There was some discussion about new members understanding school committee role in the community. There was some discussion about the coronavirus and how the CDC and really the nurses or the medical point people within the schools and how they're following sort of, routine procedures that they would follow for any health concern. What else? I think that was
also
it.
talk about the structure, and because the meeting was kind of started, that was the
right.
first meeting, they will also talk about kind of a little structure change, and they're also asking if any subject that we want to discuss, they're open for that. Yeah.
And it's open to any school committee member. They really emphasize that anyone can go.
Now I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor? Aye. All right.